Hello, welcome to another Green Team of the Legendarium episode. Today I have with me Spook,
Hello.
Yettibeats,
Hey, hey.
and Sean, aka Black Diamond.
Hey.
This is our third episode covering The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty saga. In this episode, we will be covering parts 4 and 5 in the book. They're called The Caged Wolf and Clouds Race Across the Sky. I'm excited to discuss the conclusion of this first book. Okay, so we will do a quick, non-spoilery in the terms of not spoiling these two last parts of the book. But I am curious because this is the second time for all of you and the first time for myself. What were your impressions? Actually, I think Yeti, is this your third time?
It's my third time. Wait, Sean, you've read it twice?
No, first time for me. First time.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I never
But
reread
you
it.
finished the book.
Two and a half
right?
months ago, yeah. But I haven't read it since then.
Yeah. He's
Oh,
got a
okay,
great
okay,
memory.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that reread it for the second.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So, general thoughts without going into the details. Did this last two parts, especially the ending, did it land?
I mean,
Is this
Sean
where
should
you
go
want to go
first.
first?
No. Sean, go first. You're the first time.
You want to
reading
go first for spoiler part? Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it landed. This section is probably the best reading out of the three we've done, I'd say. Like all the themes and character developments really come to a head. Like a lot of payoffs, a lot of just great moments. The pace quickens up a bit, gets more focused. Emotional payoffs are there. So yeah. And then the ending also one of the better endings I've read this year, I'd say. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Nice. What about you, Spook?
It was great. Even on the reread, knowing kind of everything that happens, it goes a sort of different direction than the kind of front beginning of the book, because in the beginning we see a lot of POVs. That's kind of as far as I'll say, I guess, for this kind of section of discussion. So it changes a lot, and it was very enjoyable. We get to see kind of new stuff. I keep forgetting we're a non-spoiler, and I want to start talking.
Yeah.
But no, we get to see more of the technology in the world. We get to see what's kind of set up for the later books. I think, I assume. But yeah, as it landed, I did enjoy the ending. It's kind of a predictable ending, but it's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty satisfying and how everything wrapped up, but obviously there's more to come. And this is just the first era of the saga. I really, really enjoyed seeing more of the tech, which is something we had talked about in our first episode. The expectation should be that there's not too much of it in this first book, but there should be more in the later books. So, all right, Yeti, third time. Does it still slap?
Just as good as the first time. And in particular, these two, the fourth and fifth sections, to me is where really the emotional stuff hits you, or at least it's supposed to. And every read has just been the same. Like it doesn't lessen in regards to certain scenes and certain characters. So yeah, I mean, I loved it. I actually do think where it does kind of set up things for the second book, and reading it again, there's like a certain chapter, I won't tell you guys, but literally like alludes to what's going to happen in the next book. Like I was reading, I'm like, oh, he knew where this was going just from like a line that a character says. But I do think you could just read this as a standalone. Like you don't have to keep going. And I felt that the first time. I loved it so much that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to continue, because I just thought it was I got everything I needed out of it, and was kind of curious how it would even go on. And then having read all of it, I get it now. Thank God I read on. But yeah, I loved it. And you really, like Spook said, it kind of focuses on these like core characters at this point and their dynamics with each other. And some of them are really complex. You really like, how does this relationship work? How did this go so wrong? With it, like it really is buckles down in that sense is why I kind of like this as an ending. And yeah, ending was inevitable. I think you start to see it that halfway through. I think we all kind of saw it last episode.
Right.
There's one thing you said there, Yeti, that kind of clocked me, where you said you could really read this as a standalone novel. And I went, yeah, because you get kind of the whole story. There's a little bit teased for later on that's like, hey, if you want to keep reading, keep reading. But the way the book works is almost as a standalone. And I'm curious how the next 3 books kind of
Mm-hmm.
work. If they're just going to be a standalone trilogy kind of set after, or if they're going to be 3 books just kind of directly after this one, or how he writes the next 3.
I would say, all I'd say just with the publishing aspect of it was he planned on this being 3 books, a 3-book, trilogy. The second book clearly feels that way, and then he wrote 2 more. So as for the third and the fourth, I think that could have just been a massive monster book, and I'm excited
Sure.
to see, for you guys to read how the third book ends. I wrote, don't look at my Goodreads review, but it's like one of the most ridiculous endings I've ever seen from a book. Which is I don't mean Brandon Sanderson style. I'm just I can't believe he ended a book like this, and it was exciting. Anyway,
Sure.
yeah, it's interesting.
Gotcha. I think we want to get into spoilers. So
Yeah,
with
we
that,
should.
here we go. And Yeti has dibs on speaking first. What do you have to share with us?
Yeah, so I only wanted to go first because I just think we have to talk about, if we're going to talk about this book and the ending and everything, just Mata and Kuni. And if this book works for you at all, if you really like it, then like I said, the emotional aspect of their relationship has to work for you. If it doesn't, then I don't think this whole book works for you. And there's 2 scenes for me that every time I read it, just destroy me and are kind of thematic through the series. But the first one is when Kuni and Mata have that meeting out on a lake or whatever, or on the sea, and they're in separate boats. And he, Mata brings out his father, and is threatening to kind of bake him alive and stuff like that. And Kuni has to play the part of someone who just doesn't care and say, "Go ahead," and he makes that choice. And he does it for the good of Dara's future, and he thinks that's the best choice. But it's gut wrenching for Mata to be just their friendship again, just taking so many blows. But this is an even more personal one that he's I cannot believe how fallen my brother has fallen. He thinks I would do this to his own, our father, and just being inside both their heads always crushes me. That it's another for Dara to essentially succeed as a nation. You're seeing that their relationship has to crumble over kind of false pretenses. They're both not wrong and Mata's wrong in his views and stuff, but really they love each other. And so that one always breaks me. And then obviously the very end where they call a truce and they said, hey, we'll just have your side, I have my side. And Luan kind of tells Kuni it's just a piece of paper. Now's the time to attack. And he essentially has to betray Mata, who's been betrayed his whole life, for the better of his country in decades in the future. I love that conversation between Luan and Kuni where he's what are the people going to think of me in the history books? And he's, Luan says, you can't think of how you're going to people look at you today. It's 100 years from now, and things like that where the country is now. So, but I always remember the reaction Mata has of one of his generals telling him that Kuni's betrayed him, and he kind of just sighs. It's not even an anger at that point. He's just, oh, my brother. So that always makes me emotional, and I feel like if you don't buy their relationship or you don't care about it, and the character work isn't done enough for you, then this book doesn't work. But those 2 scenes, I think, really emphasize the beauty of this story.
Yeah, great pull, great scenes. They hit hard.
That second scene in particular is one of the quotes I wrote down, where Luanzia says, a knife is not malicious merely because it's sharp, and a plot is not evil merely because it's effective. All depends on the wielder. The grace of kings is not the same as morals governing individuals. And that is such a hard-hitting scene.
Right.
Because we have this, with this brotherhood that's breaking down, and we have Kuni wanting to just kind of foster it again. And Luan's it's never going to be what it was. You have to do the bad thing. We both know it's the bad thing, but hopefully it is a good thing in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much
absolutely.
putting others before self.
Hmm.
And the others in this case is the people of Dara. And I think the eulogy that Kuni gives for
Yeah.
Mata, that really, I mean, if you don't buy their relationship after that eulogy, like, okay, I don't know what you were reading. I don't think you read this book. I really like Kuni as a character in that he is very authentic. He's very much, I think, because of his origins, he wasn't born into power. He wasn't born into wealth. And so he has this more scrappy, authentic way of looking at life and at people. And he isn't afraid to acknowledge that this is, yes, he was victorious in battle, but he lost somebody really dear to him. And there was a line that I think it was like, he cried like nobody could remember him crying, just letting out his pain and showing that he actually really did care and didn't really care about what other people would have thought.
Yeah, and like even like we'll talk about scenes, but the one where he goes to the banquet, Cooney does when he first kind of is under Mata's thumb, and he has that like speech to Mata in front of everyone that kind of sways Mata, and you're like, oh, this could turn around. And of course, all it takes is someone who doesn't, sees Cooney as a threat. I think it was Pairing who just kind
Yeah.
of molds Mata's mind or then sends someone to kill Cooney. And it's just little things throughout this whole book that tilt one way or the other how it could have been. Like, yeah, I don't think it's written, but you could have, I'm sure Cooney thought throughout the series, what could have been if he did this or did that, or if we could have salvaged our relationship if I did this instead of that. But every time, I mean, that's not how reality works. If, your goal like his was to shape Dara in a better future.
Yeah, the chapter after the banquet, Torlu is like immediately already giving advice to Mata about what would be best if there's like another war with the states. So it's like, all right, did we get anywhere here, or is it still the same
Yeah.
like warring states? No one trusts anyone, no progress. So yeah, I think there's a quote also in that chapter. Sometimes those who lit the spark that began a conflagration must be consumed by it, lest the fire burn on indefinitely, which is kind of speaking toward kind of the perpetual conflict going on and how decisive actions need to be taken, dramatic, decisive actions, or else, yeah, it's going to be in this kind of state where there's no progress being made. I think Cooney recognizes that and comes to recognize that throughout like the section of the reading, which is why he takes these drastic actions we've mentioned of betraying Mata.
Well, yeah, Luan literally tells him that when he said, I mean, you guys are sharing now, but it's only a matter of years before someone starts fighting, whether it's you or him or someone else. I mean, it's.
And then the ending with Luan alluding to another possible war.
Raising a glass to Jin. Yeah.
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 It's pretty applicable to like our own lives, I think. It's this tug of war between short term and long term. And there's this, immediate like when the rebellion started, there was a very clear like antagonist that you're fighting, the emperor, the empire. And that is very easy to focus on and pour all your energy into, like, I need to fight the empire. But what happens after? So if you beat the empire, right? What happens after? And there's not a lot of times that part is just like we'll figure it out if we get there once we get there. But if you don't have a really good, strong, clear vision of what you're working towards, then you either don't succeed initially, or once you're done, then there is this chaos that happens. And so I do really appreciate the way that the story was crafted. I know it's like very, very clear to very closely adhering to real history. So that kind of helps, but it's also like very real. If you have something, an obstacle, right? There's the challenge of overcoming that obstacle, but for what purpose? What do you want to happen after you come out of it? That's as important to focus on too.
Yeah, that question's like a lot of this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the chapter letters where Gia and Cooney are writing back and forth, which I really, really like that section.
Love that chapter.
Yeah.
Change in writing format, the conversation style. Cooney writes to Gia saying, "Now that I have seen the larger world, I wish to change it, as does Mata. But while he wishes to restore the world to a state that never was, I wish to bring it to a state that has not yet been seen."
That's my favorite quote. Yep. I
Great
love that
quote.
one. Because Matza sees, he lives in a world of myth. It's
Yeah.
not even reality. The past is what he heard of it, the mythical figures and doing these great war, battles and things like that. And that's how he thinks things should be dictated going forward. But that's, like it says, that's a thing that never was. That's not how it actually was, It wasn't. So, yeah, I love that quote. I love it.
That actually echoes something that a conversation between Soto and Cooney had about, when Cooney like is in a disguise and sneaks to visit Gia and the family, and he finds out about Otho and Gia. Soto says to him, "You've both grown more used to the image of each other than the reality. That's the danger with ideals. We're never as perfect as how others wish us to be." And, we could like have a whole discussion about that.
Incredible relationship advice right there.
Yeah.
Soto continues, "But I've always found that true happiness must take into account our imperfections. Faith is stronger when it acknowledges and embraces doubt." And I think that's true about like relationships, personal relationships, but also like how Mata and Kuni choose to approach, what their vision of the future could be. And Kuni very much is accepting of the imperfections and of the people of Dara versus Mata and pairing as well. They're more about like snuffing out the things that they don't like and imposing the things that they want, which is very the two distinct approaches.
Yeah, I wish I had the quote on me, but to that point, I think it's Cooney was telling Mata or something like that, that he has this image of himself that even he can't live up to. And so he turns himself into something else to try to fit a different image. And that's why he turns into this killer. It might have been Mira telling him. And that's so true that he doesn't really live with his imperfections. Mata does. He sees them as this weakness. And so he becomes something that he thinks
Right.
he should be, which is someone who puts people to death. And like, I really think it's a testament to Lou to making Mata so sympathetic. I mean, this guy's butchering. I mean, he's a monster, and like, if you just like look at it on paper, but yet I can't. Every time I read this, I feel so bad for him. It's I don't know. I think he's really a tragic character.
I agree. Yeah. And you see the people that he's surrounded by, and it's a contrast to who Cooney has
Yeah.
around him.
That's why we talked so much about it last time.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it Mira who was saying that quote?
It might have
Maybe?
been, yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
right.
But even like as I cried at the end again, where his like final thing where he's riding with his like his horse rider bros, and they get to that cabin by the sea, which is where Cooney and Gia used to live with their kids, and he like
Yeah.
flood of memories come flashing back to him, where he's holding Cooney's child and just kind of better times. And he says one of his quotes from his country, and he says, "The past is a country to which one cannot return." And I thought that was like a beautiful sentiment of,
Banger.
like, yeah. And then he just goes out like a boss. But beautiful stuff. And so I only wanted to start this conversation with Kuni and Mata because I think there's other relationships too that are really deep in the story. But for this book, Grace of Kings, it's really them too.
Yeah.
That's kind of like makes it go.
They're up there for like top tier fantasy, character relationship, just character dynamic, character work. Yeah, if you like this book, you like a lot of what Ken Liu does with them for sure.
I guess it's probably beating a dead horse by now, but to belabor the point, the way that Ken Liu makes Mata not just like flat and a villain, the way that he makes him more human I do really appreciate. So, and he does it in such like graceful ways, I guess is the way I would put it. The relationship between Mira and Mata. And it's not even really focusing on Mata, it's really more focusing on Mira, but you get the humanity of Mata from her perspective. And so it's you know, Mata doesn't really eat all the food that the cooks make, but Mira makes, you know, food that he's familiar with, and he eats all of it and he wants more, right? And it's just like that little touch of he's not just a monster. Like there is more to him than that. And he misses his home. He has so much love and like loyalty to his home. And at the end where he says, I can't go back on my own. They will they will see me as, you know, whether it's like a traitor or like they won't see me as a hero. And that
Yeah.
kills him.
That's why the quote that Yeti brought up, the past is a, what was it? The past is a country
Can't
you
return
cannot
to.
return to. It's like multi-layered in how perfect it is that Mata's saying that.
Yeah.
Because he wants to return to a past, a country, you know, like both at the same time, separately and as like one thing together. And yeah, he can't return there
Yeah. Or
for
even just
multiple reasons.
return to the country that it was before the emperor took
Yeah.
over his people. I mean, that's just he wants to go back to that way, but it's impossible. You know, and all your decisions are moving towards that, trying to do that, which is an impossibility, and it's just sad. It's just, and it's like you said, Pendy. He's not like an outright, just you know, white or black villain. It's just like so many people. His views are just that's just his views, and that's his way of thinking. This is how things should be. It's not evil. It's just in our in our mind, and Cooney's misguided, and he's just so stuck in them for how he was raised, how the people treated him around him, that it's you know, it's almost it's something like I imagine if someone was in, I don't want to offend Scientology people, but like in a deep cult, you know, or something like that, to get them out of that way of thinking. It's same with him. How could you possibly get him out of the way his point of view of the world should be? It would take years, you know, and compassion.
Yeah.
And Cooney had a little bit of that during those time when they were going through the revolution. I think when he would sit down with friends and joke around with Mata seeing this different, you know, way of life. But eventually, once they got split up, he reverted back, you know.
There's actually a really I thought this was quite clever how Ken Liu put in the character of Zato. So Zato was like this scholar of this like whatever dude that had a lot of like philosophical teachings about all sorts of things, about relationships, about politics, life, right? And Zato was a character who just accidentally became like the face of a rebellion and became the king. And the transition for that character where at first it was just, you know, in the zeal of things, he was like pushed forward to go make a speech. And, you know, he was unsure at first. He was just like starting to spout, you know, his academic learnings about this whatever that philosopher was. And as he was making his speech and the reaction of the crowd, he gets more and more fanatic because of the high from the reaction of the crowd. He's like, "Oh, this is what people want," right? And I thought, and ultimately he takes it way too far where he's way too rigid in how he approaches war
Mm.
because the philosopher was never a soldier, never actually fought any war, and was like that was his downfall. But that in just that like one character, it mirrors a lot of what Mata went through and just very succinctly.
Well said.
And I think kind of mirroring the discussion of Mata and Cooney, we have the relationship of Defiro and Rathiro,
Yeah.
and how their relationship, like it mirrors Cooney and it mirrors Mata, but when they broke up, they're not leaving each other for, you know, due to betrayal. There's like, this is where my life is taking me. In the truly tragic ending of It Is Rat, going the way of Mata,
Mm-hmm.
and how it shows how the actions of the leaders kind of, again, just kind of pushing the point of the actions of leaders, just motivating and leading to the actions of their kind of most devout followers.
Mm-hmm. That part, man, that was so sad. I did not see that part coming.
No.
No.
Yeah, I thought he would like, go back to his brother.
Yeah, I
not
was hoping there would be a
die.
reconciliation of some sort, kind of like an opposite to what happens to Kuni and Mata. But
Because there's never like I don't know how much the two brothers were invested in the politics of their respective side, but they're very much caught up in the leader that they love and
yes.
think should be ruling. So I thought that they'd be okay, and not switching sides per se, but like, oh, my leader's gone, I'll just go on with my life back to return to my brother. But apparently, yeah, they were very much, going okay to die for them.
I mean, with Rat naming his sword Simplicity, saying, "Until I met you, my life has never been just easy, But the moment I met you, I knew what to do." Kind of paraphrasing. I think that was the true kind of like, at least for me, the turning point of seeing this character go from idolizing Mata to just full on worshiping him. Yeah.
I did think it was enjoyable, heartbreaking, but seeing them both elevate to like so close to Kuni and Mata. Like Mata saw value, and so did Kuni in both of them. And I forget which one was on which side, to be honest with you. But whoever brother was on Kuni's side, like he was so loyal to Kuni and his, his outlook that he was the one who like got whipped for him to go undercover when they first made that get off the island, and then takes the dude's head. But I mean, you have to have such belief in your in the ideals of who you're following to do that. And same thing, obviously, with Mata, the brother with Mata, where he actually literally ends his life with Mata. And that whole thing's interesting because same with Mata, but they both know Kuni would keep them alive, like after getting captured. You know what I mean? It's not like he's a vengeful person. So the fact that he could have spent the rest of his life with his brother, but he was just so enamored with Mata. He went the same way, but it's not like they had no choice. Kuni definitely would have let them live. Like, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Defiro was on Kuni's side, and then Ratho was on Mata's side.
Ratho. And wasn't Defiro there?
Yeah.
Wasn't it as Ratho
was watching him do it?
Did it? He was just like, Rat, no. And so I think that was one of the more not the more, but I think that was the most heartbreaking was Defiro was there.
He was the only one not at Kuni's coronation because he spent a year of mourning for his brother back at their home. It's just like those are cool details that Lou puts in. The fact that he says he's not there because he's mourning his brother for a year. Like it's really every character, even how small, just is like impactful, even little screen time. But
and how much he calls back to when he's set stuff up too, because we see Kuni when his mother dies. He's like, well, I gotta go spend a year in mourning, so I will see you later, Mata. And that's kind of the whole start of them breaking apart, because we see Mata get more radicalized towards his own ideologies, because that's when Kuni left.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a callback to a death or a year of mourning is kind of what split the brothers up, and including Rafiro and Dethiro. And then a death is what's leading to another kind of year of mourning.
So we talk a lot about the men in this book. There are also a few women to speak of. And how do we feel about the relationship of Gia and Rasana?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Who's Rasana again?
Kuni's second wife.
The second wife.
Kuni's second wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The smoke craft.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
Yeah. No, it's fine. their relationship's interesting for sure. But in this book, at least, I feel like a lot of what they bring, and I think I've seen criticism online to this, but a lot of what they bring is the impact on Cooney and how they affect him going forward, and how important they are for his success, each of them. And I mean, it was Gia's the one. I mean, I'm way like I can't wait to talk about Gia and Cooney's relationship because that's the most bizarre thing. I don't know how to even talk about it. But like, she's the one who brought up that he should be open to
Yes.
using women in the
Yeah.
military, and that's a huge blind spot that he has,
Oh yeah.
and everyone has. And so, and if it wasn't for that, he never would have considered Jin Mazzotti, who is another incredibly
The
important
goat.
woman. Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
I remember. I think I texted you guys in the thing. I can't wait for you guys to read about Jin. But so in that case, Gia's she's like one of the best characters in the series. Like the most well written. It's unbelievable. Like she's on top tier status just as a written character. And then Rosanna, to have someone come in so late in the story, and just kind of with the smoke stuff, how she can look into people's hearts and how that's useful for getting what they want and using it. But also, she's the one who talked to Jin, saying you're not using women in your military, and it's kind of like you're hypocritical for that because you're a woman, you want respect, but you won't even put them in your military.
Yeah.
And so they eventually put them up in the sky because they're more lightweight. Between those two, a lot more to come, I'll say, on that front. But I did think it was interesting when like Gia got left behind on the trying to escape, and Rosanna was going to get off, and then she said, "No, I'll do it." And
Oh, yeah.
Soto's like, very smart of you to do that. Now she's always in your debt. Like there's always kind of games going on, and it's alluded to that that maybe Gia is more prepared for that than Rosanna is by the end of the book.
Right.
She is kind of the political face. Like if Cooney's marriages or his women are a coin, one side's the political side and one side's like his emotional rock. At least as of the end of this book, Gia is the political and Rosanna's the emotional rock.
What really and I'm kind of dreading this is the children.
Yeah. Yeah, Cooney's kids' reaction to him at one point was pretty sad. Like when they first are reunited.
And kind of how that relates to the ending of the book, where he's naming his kid with Rosanna, where he named his children with Gia basically after the love of their mother, but named his kid with Rosanna after the love of him. And so it's interesting to see how much that time away from his firstborn children really affected his perception of them.
But it's also because the kids themselves, right?
Yeah.
How they perceive him. And so he feels a lot closer to Rosanna's son because, I mean, he's been there since the kid was born.
Yeah. And there'll be characters in the next book, I assume. They'll probably be older and full-fledged characters.
Yeti chuckling at us.
Are you fishing for confirmation? Or
I don't even need confirmation. It's got to be true.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just think there's so much interesting. The dynamic between I can't stop thinking about, but Gia and Cooney, when he comes back to that situation after so long, and like they realize there's just this coldness between them that they lost. Like the flame went out, and I thought that was kind of the most readable chapters in the book, where Soto kind of talks to both of them and kind of has to like marriage counsel them.
Yeah.
And it's it's such an interesting aspect because she's resentful that he's taking being a king or trying to shape the future more than being a father. And she now has changed. He said used to be so adventurous. Now she just wants safety for her children. And she Soto calls her on like, well, you're sleeping around with your servant guy, Odo Kryn, and she said, I contain multitudes. I can contain, I have love for both them in my heart. And Soto just like comes back so swift with her, is like, well, doesn't Cooney have love for both you and his country in his heart? He also has multitudes. How could you hold him to a standard that you don't hold to yourself? And I was like, Oh my god,
Yeah.
this is great stuff. I don't know how it ever work. I mean, that really it's just not for me. Second wives and just things like that. But I don't know. It's really interesting. Just them all talking through it, like all that chapter is, and the future chapter, them talking through this situation they're in, and the sacrifice for those ideals. Again, for Cooney's ideals, he's sacrificing, like you said, memories with his children, relationships with his children, them having to see their mother get taken away and go hostage as they fly away on a blimp or whatever they use. Yeah, it's that's why fantasy can be more than just battles or like awesome
Yeah.
moments, like stuff like this. I hadn't read much of these kind of
Mhm.
interpersonal relationships like that really make you think like, how would I even, you know, you wouldn't blame Cooney for just wanting to settle down, but this is too much. You're right. But
I think that conversation or those conversations in that section in general was also really important. It was a turning point for Cooney, and I think he kind of got his swagger back after that, got his confidence back, and was able to, like, everything after that was just, he was way more confident and decisive, and just like really rallied everyone around him. So it was big.
it's like a Rocky 2 montage. He's got a swagger back, ready to fight Creed again.
Yeah, I'm very curious and interested to get to know Rasana more and have her as a character more fleshed out because you're right. Yeti, she did come in quite late in this book, and so I think that's the kind of like the setup for what's to come in the later books. I do think that there will be a lot of tension, as has already been set up.
Between those two, I did like the moment where Gia, when I think they're all reunited after that, and she had met Rasana, and then she's talking to Rasana's like maid. And
Oh
she's like,
yes,
"Oh, do you know how they're like?" And they're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah, yeah,
I'm not really around them." And so she like scoots the question. She's like, "Oh, well, I hear she doesn't really laugh that much."
yeah,
And the
yeah,
maid's
yeah.
like, "What? No, they laugh all the time."
Yeah.
Cooney, he plays
Yeah.
music for her, and just like Gia's just so smart with that kind of things to get information, and it must be hurtful to hear that, which it was, but she's still. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. All right.
Did you want to talk about Jin and
Let's do it.
the goat
Yes,
general?
the goat. Yeah, that's probably a good time.
The Marshal.
Queen. The queen.
She has a tragic backstory too.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I was not expecting the maiming of the children that they saved. That was really
No.
hard.
Right. Yeah. That was rough.
And I think it was w- why I say like this is a very character driven book. It's like you have a whole chapter focusing on Jin's backstory, and then you see how that has shaped that character and how they apply, how they behave based on that. It's very smooth writing.
Well, it's so cool that even before that, what he does, it's the letters to Gia and Cooney's like getting writing these letters saying, Kogo Puma like left
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah.
He's abandoned me. I'm done for. And then he's like, no, he came back
Yeah.
and said, you got to meet someone. And it kind of builds
Oh
this
yeah.
mystery. And then they're
Yes.
like, yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I chased this woman down or a person down and who got held up by a mysterious doctor. This doctor
Mm-hmm.
was asked her questions, obviously a god, playing his
Yep.
role.
Yep. Yep.
And then he said, "Oh, I have to meet this, general that Mata didn't want anything to do with," and finds out it's a woman. And he's like, "It's all because of you, Gia, that I would ever meet her." And then it ends the chapter and it says Jin Mazzotti, and then you get the whole
Yep.
background of her as like an orphan, joins a gang. The gang like cuts up these children and mains them, gets abused by the step parent type things. There's a scene, and then she gets taken in by a dock worker, mysterious dock worker, old guy who trains her and teaches her the strategy game. I guess it's like chess or something.
Probably go.
Oh, go,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was thinking go.
And then there's a great scene where she's like approached by this older bully and saying like, fight me right now.
Crawl
And even though
between my
she,
legs or fight me.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
even though she could beat him up, she says there's virtue in just being patient and crawling through his legs. So it's just cool to see, and then how she has to kind of go undercover as a guy, and until leading up to the moment she meets Cooney. But you're right. I love that writing technique where you just get a whole chapter's worth of this character's life story, and it's not like boring or anything. It's just, I don't know, kind of gets you jacked up. It's like, oh my god, Cooney found like a hidden gem, like what I
Yeah.
Yeah.
mean?
It's very applicable and it's not too long-winded. That's the thing.
No.
I love how also it evokes like a satisfying feeling when you're like, all this was happening behind the scenes as I'm reading the book, other stuff going on in the book, like with Cooney. Because like, you get the reveal that, yeah, like Jin had been waiting for this moment, and you do get filled in with some of her backstory, but it makes the world feel very lived in and alive when you're kind of just Ken Liu like gestures toward that situation, like her story, and like, hey, all this was happening, this was set up, and like the time is now for it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Satisfying is a really good word for just this book in general.
Yep. Yeah, like Eddie said earlier, just there's a lot of small details. Like everything is really well thought out. Like the naming of the kids. Like most authors would just give the kid a name, but maybe there's like some meaning there, but Ken Liu kind of gives it like political meaning, like poetic meaning, and then like has Cooney talk about the implications. It's all very well thought out.
Yeah, I definitely paid attention to those kids' names this time around. I'm like, I see. I get it.
So when Jin is announced as the marshal, obviously all the other officers were very upset. And I really like the approach that she took. First, I mean, she really did acknowledge the gender discrimination. She goes on to say this whole thing about how, like, yeah, normally, or like in history, there are a bunch of examples about how, great leaders like whip their army into shape. But if I do the same, like, it's not going to be successful because I'm a woman. And so she appeals to all those officers and says, so I will need your ideas and help, gentlemen, on earning the hearts of our soldiers, really giving them a purpose. And it's not just her lording over them. And additionally, her leadership style. It says the new marshal told her officers that their job was not only to carry out the orders of the chain of command, but to improvise on the basis of changing battlefield conditions. And very much like, no, you have the autonomy because you soldiers know best like what's happening right in that situation. So you have the autonomy to make the decisions of how to fight in that moment. And I just thought, how Malazan of her. So
Yeah, I think the two people specifically were, was it Min Kakri and Than Karakuno? I thought that was such a brilliant writing writing move when, she sits them down and realizes like, hey, they're not going to listen to me. You two are the other two people who Cooney probably would have assigned to the marshal spot. I know you don't like me and you don't understand his decision, but I need you two to have success and for Cooney to have success. And I need your ideas. And it's just such a smart move for her to bring them on board and kind of make them feel comfortable and, temper their egos and their hurt egos before anything else gets started. Again, just like a small detail that I think other authors might have skipped. They just would have had her as the genius who comes to the fruition and then does everything. But yeah, it's small moments like that make it work.
And I think it's also the choice, I guess, if this is what happened in history or not, but it's like the choice for this character to be successful as opposed to then a coup happening and like she gets killed or murdered or whatever. But that does then set up something interesting where she becomes so successful.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a more interesting dynamic happening with her and Luanzia and Cooney, and even
I
just
love
the
that.
outright temptation from the gods to her to betray Cooney, right? And she's like, "Wait a minute. He saw me when I was really a nobody. He gave me these opportunities. So no, I'm going to remain loyal to him." And when we'll see, because like Luanzia is also like, are you gonna do anything to temper her? She's calling herself queen. Yeah.
And that's another way where Rosanna comes in, where they're talking. Rosanna's like, well, what would you do if she was a man? How would you treat her?
Right.
He said, I'd let her reach for as much power as she wants, and eventually, she'll hit her limit, and, I wouldn't press it. And that's what he did. He just sent her a note and congratulated her, and, that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that aspect because throughout the book, we've had characters reach similar things to maybe Jin and then have turned on people, or so it was totally plausible. And I remember reading the first time, like, oh man, Cooney's success. I knew something bad had to happen.
I was
And it really,
stressed.
yeah, it stresses you out. Like, oh man, I don't know. But yeah, so that it was cool that was. I just didn't even think of that when everything was happening. I'm like, oh, he's just
Yeah.
found the winning ticket. I mean,
Yeah.
but you don't
Yeah.
realize that she could easily take power for herself. She has a military. She's super smart. So in that sense. So
Yeah, I was stressed, but I was pretty sure she would stay loyal.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was right.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the world just wasn't ready for a woman leader.
Other characters. So, any other favorite characters that we haven't talked about?
I just briefly mentioned how Soto is a Zindu.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ends up like saving. I forget the exact situation, but like Mata was in a position to do something pretty
It was
impactful.
gonna like
And
kill Gia or harm
oh
Gia and the
yeah,
children.
that was it. Yep.
Because
And
Cooney was starting the war.
yeah.
yeah, and Soto steps in and like, listen, you're not. I'm a Zindu, by the way, and you're not hurting them.
Yeah, you'd have to kill me first, and
Yeah.
sully the Zindu name. And,
Yeah.
and they had a good conversation where he's like, "Well, Cooney's done all this and that," and she's like, "You've slaughtered people and sent them on a boat and burned them and sunk them like innocent
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
How can you say?" And just really shamed him. And the end of that chapter, I think, is just him looking to the grass and walking like to a field and walking away sullenly. And she's a huge character. I mean, I like that sense of mystery and how they played it, where she's like dodging nobles and anytime Mata's around, she ducks low until I think we find out when she tells Cooney at that market.
Well, we don't know what she
Oh,
tells
right.
Cooney the
We
first
don't.
time, right? It
Right.
wasn't until later, that we find out. And then her, Soto, and Gia have the conversation where Gia's like, "You told Cooney who you were, didn't you?" Because otherwise, Cooney probably wouldn't have been brave enough, like had the courage to, cause all this chaos for Mata.
Yeah, and risk their lives also.
Let's go through it. She told Cooney who she was, ensuring so he knew that his wife and children were safe, right? He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I have a Mata there." She saved their marriage. She stopped Mata from killing them. She had a pep talk with Gia when Gia was like, "Oh, what can I do? I'm just a wife." And she
Yes.
said, "People in power have the responsibility to change things, and you will be in power." And kind of got Gia hackles up to be the political
Yeah.
person. She's altered the history of Dara maybe more than I don't know 99% of people, and she's just laying low, just doing all this stuff. So just a brilliant addition to the story, honestly.
Yeah.
Jin did say, and this is what caught Kogo's attention, right? A man who can kill several people with a sword is merely a living weapon. A great warrior can kill thousands of men with just his mind. And I mean, Soto isn't necessarily killing people directly, but it very much speaks to like, yeah, sure, Mata is a force to be reckoned with because of his like physicality and brutal strength, but there are other ways to play this game and be even more successful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's just
What she does.
yeah. And the end goal that she has with Cooney is just to see a better, civilization, a better life for her people and people in general.
Mhm.
And she just could tell Mata just didn't, I think she even called him on it before, like, you didn't even live during the time I lived, like you don't know how it actually was. You have
Exactly.
this idea that's he's almost like a big child. He's like a 8-foot
He is.
baby
He
who
hasn't
can
Yeah.
murder a ton of people.
he's
Awesome
never
dual
really
wielding.
been given the opportunity to grow up like a normal child, right? Just the circumstances of his family where he had to be on the run. So
He's very Karsa coded. So ring the Malazan bell again.
So, I don't have too much time left. So I do want to just start wrapping up a little bit.
Sure.
Spook, did you have a favorite character or a character that you want to discuss we haven't covered?
No. Not. The thing with this book is I think it does characters very well, but it doesn't do all of the characters very well. So I think there's a lot
Mhm.
of characters we haven't seen much that are impactful. They're like very clearly have an impact on the story, but we
Yeah.
don't really know them.
Yeah, it's hard
So
to remember that they did.
Yeah,
Kogu Yellow.
Kogu Yellow.
His
Yeah.
attack system. He finds Jin, but I don't really know much about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's like my favorite character.
I mean, he's literally where would Cooney be without him? Honestly,
He's like his parent.
I don't know.
At this point. But no, so outside of what we've already talked about, I don't think there's much even more to say in the
Okay.
book. I think we've
Not too much.
covered the characters pretty well.
Since we brought up Kogo, I made a note about, because we especially in episode 1, we talked about the writing style and how it's very precise. It's kind of like quick. There's not a lot of fluff. It's kind of just like saying what happened, very to the point. And it can move quick because of that. But so an example of the pacing, like it was a new paragraph. It opens up with Cooney thinking he needs to have a conversation with Kogo. It's like, all right, I need to have a conversation with Kogo. I'm going to invite him for tea. And the next line is like them meeting. And then like the next line after that is the summary of what they concluded at them having tea. In a lot of other books, it'd be like, I got to talk to Kogo. And then they'd be like, next chapter, Kogo arrives. And there's like 10 pages with them talking. And like you get the conclusion of the conversation from there. But yeah, in this series, it's like 3 lines.
This is his short story craft, like showing.
Mm-hmm. Similarly, I think I was watching a Daniel Green review, and a comment by user Your Black Local said Ken Liu's method of writing is that he writes more than he needs, then finds the emotional core of the story and cuts everything else out. I don't know if Ken said that or this guy is just postulating. I assume Ken said that at some point, but that makes a lot of sense that he does that he would do that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Ken Liu, come on the pod.
I'm on the pod.
I mean, he summed up 2 wars in 600 pages.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
And there was like meat in it. There was depth.
Yeah.
Most authors, this would be a trilogy.
Two trilogies, to be honest.
Oh no.
Not just this book, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested in how he handles the next books with pacing and with writing style to see how he continues on. If not continuing on with the same even kind of style of writing, if the next books will be kind of like how other books would have broken this up a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bravo.
No, we'll talk about it more in the later books. But I just like the quote, I think this is Luan and Cooney talking. And Cooney says, the people think I see a clear path, but I'm stumbling in the dark too. And then he says, maybe that's what the gods are doing as well. And I just love the gods in this book. And I can't
That's
wait.
actually a great segue, because that's like my last topic that we haven't talked about is the
Mhm.
gods and like how we feel about their incorporation of the gods into the story.
Yeah, I don't know. I just just hold on. Get ready. I mean, my favorite is Lutho, who like the gods have a conversation at the like a hangout at the end of the book.
Right.
And then at the very end, one of them's like, Lutho, I noticed you didn't speak at all during this thing. And he gives some sly answer. But he's like, Lutho's kind of like Luanzi is the one he kind of looks up to. He's like a god of fishermen, divination, mathematics, knowledge. But he is, maybe not from this book, but he's great to read about.
Lutho's for Cooney, right?
I think but I think when it's Cooney or Mata, definitely. But I think he's like Luan's, like the one Luan prays to.
He meddles a lot, this Lutho.
He does, but not like openly. He kind of has like, because he did something with the coronation. Remember when the body of Mata got like taken by like 20 different animals, kind of?
Yes.
And then the gods thought that would like kind of screw things up for Cooney, but one of his followers made it look good for Cooney. And the gods were like, Lutho, how'd you know that would happen? And he kind of just smirks and just says, I didn't. Zen-like answer. And but yeah, I think he's just a great character in general. Tazu's the one I thought always meddling, trying to tempt people. The shark, always trying to get people to kill Mata.
Yes. He, I think, is more extreme, and Lutho is like more subtle.
Yeah.
yes, we didn't talk about that scene, the burial scene for Mata, where that was wild. And I really, really like the kind of like basically the breakdown of what happened. Because if you could just read it as like, okay, the gods like came, and because for Namen, the
Mhm.
birds came and took him away to heaven. And in this one, you could have just been like, oh, the gods were welcoming Mata home, which is the version that was spoken. But then when the gods were talking about it, they're like, dude,
I think like the birds were coming down, and then he
the
says like the
wolves.
wolves come out of the ground. I'm like, what? Oh
Yeah.
my god! And they
And
give him
they're
like
talking
this.
about like that's how it wasn't intended to be like that.
Then they all like lined up like a football team to escort him. Like this is
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
In that ending, sorry, you can keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say in that ending God conversation, there was mention of like the mother of all the gods, right?
Yes.
Is
There's
is that
Hedwig.
worth bringing up at any point? I don't know, or I get maybe that's a future thing, but I took note of that. I was like, oh, there's some sort of God hierarchy here, and like, do we know the mother?
Yeah, I would just say like that quote I said, like how Cooney said, like maybe the gods are stumbling in the dark as well. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
through the later books that kind of shows itself. Whereas like we think gods have it all, all figured out because they're gods and they're just drinking champagne and playing around. But there's reasons they do things,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, where it's like it's important. They have like investments in this too, and even though they're gods, they need things to go a certain way for whatever reason, which will definitely be
Yeah.
more clear in the next book too. But yeah, it really like after this book, it really once you keep reading, you're like, oh my god, he really is going like big with this word. Like I see what he's doing, kind of.
Oh, that's so exciting. Because for me, the gods in this one was kind of the weakest part because
Sure.
they just kind of showed up randomly, and there wasn't too much like as explicit, conversations with the gods or like even talking about them. And we get like, oh, there was this beggar. Oh, there was this like fisherman. Oh, there was this doctor, right? And you see them, it's like planting seeds. I do feel like it is building up to something more, but it's just, very more minimal in this first book.
It's
Yeah,
like finding Hoyd.
I did like playing Find the God.
I know. It's just a god.
Is it a god or not?
If they're
Yeah, the downside.
unnamed and making an impact,
Yeah,
Mm.
the downside of the God stuff is like there'd be some situation where I'd have like a loose grasp on what happened or like how a character affected something, and then it's like, oh, the God that I don't even have a good grasp on that God's character and their
Mm.
intentions and like their alignment, and they affected that somehow. And I'm trying to like put all the pieces together, and I'm just like, I don't even know. And I leave all the pieces on the ground scattered, and then I keep reading, and that happens like a couple times. But it's whatever.
Do you feel like you're reading about the Warrens again?
I don't know. Those like they were more classified within Warren,
Yeah.
so I was able to keep up with it better.
Yeah, I can't even remember half what god is like fighting for who, or like who's side. They're like, oh, he's on your team. You're rooting for him. I'm like, who was really? I thought you were
Yeah.
rooting for this. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, they were rooting for this character who like died 200 pages ago. I
Right?
don't know.
Yeah.
I'm hoping like since new book 2, new book, I'll be able to like get like reestablish my footing and kind of keep track of it better.
Well, there is the list of major characters at the beginning of this one that does
I don't
list
read.
out the gods. Yeah, but I'll be honest, I did not really look at it when I was reading it. So, because there is the twins, there is the Tututika. I do like the names of these gods; they're pretty fun.
Yeah. I don't mean to give him too much importance. I guess I just, really the stuff on the ground's what matters. But
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that's another theme in this book is like how much is it really the gods influencing versus there is like more
hmm.
will from the people, free will. So it's like this
I
tug of
probably should have
war.
referenced this. This the gods of Dara does help a bit. Like Fifth of Waos, God of War, the Hunt,
Hmm.
his Powie. Pawi is the wolf. So
Yeah.
obviously, I guess that was partly his influence at the end, taking, or at least he had a part in taking Mata's body, I guess,
Mhm.
especially being the god of war.
Yeah.
Mata be warring.
All right. So we talked about some predictions for the next book. Any other predictions you
Let
guys
me throw
have?
one more quote in that's sums up Mata's character.
Yeah.
Chapter 47. Mata's weakness is that he doesn't trust people, so of course everyone who follows him eventually betrays him. I don't intend to make that same mistake. Yeah, that's how Cooney wins.
Yeah.
Alright, but yeah, prediction time.
Trust is really important when you're a
Yep.
leader.
Big theme. Leadership and trust.
I think Mira said that, right?
That could be true.
Because
Oh,
she was
yeah.
offered to stab him or something. And she's like, I'm not going to
Mhm.
continue this trend.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she kills herself.
Yeah, that was a little sudden. I don't know if but it's what it is.
Yeah. She didn't. I don't know if she had a spot in the story after Mata dying,
Right.
but yeah.
It was before he died too.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Ken was like, I'll get rid of her now.
Yeah. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I was like, God. I was like, oh, she's killing herself. All right.
I guess for her, she was like, I don't want to be an instrument to like harm Mata, so I'm going to take myself out of the equation. And that was her choice.
That's quite a lot of resolve to make the decision.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
But honestly, like her brothers were dead. She didn't
Yeah.
really have a home to get back to.
I just feel like, again, Cooney would let them live. And she says before that, if only we were like you a fisherman and me a farmer, like what different life we could have. And I want to be like, I know it never happened because Mata's too prideful, but maybe try to talk him in a little bit. But hey, let's just he'll seclude us. We can start a different life. But no, she's just straight to the stabbing.
Yeah. All right, predictions. Anything?
I mean, I kind of already alluded to one, but Cooney will rule. His offspring will be POVs. Also, book 2 is 0.56 stars higher on Goodreads. It's pretty big. So I guess it'll be a
baby.
better book. Better book is also a prediction of mine.
Which is
five-star book.
Rare for a sequel. Like the second book a lot of times is like, oh, it's disappointing.
Where's the Radiance?
How dare you?
It's the better one.
No, yeah, like Words of Radiance is better, which is
good.
It's considered, I think, the best one so far.
I was like,
I think it's like the best book on Goodreads.
Oh dear. Okay. All right.
That's all I got.
More science, more technology, more war, I imagine.
Yeah, like now that there's peace, science can prosper a bit more, but it's not going to be peaceful for very long, I'd imagine. So curious how they'll incorporate that.
Why not?
Sorry, why not what?
He wouldn't be writing
why don't there be peace?
Why not? Why not
books
more
of peace?
It's called the Wall of Storm.
That
doesn't,
I guess ring hopeful.
Good title.
Okay. That could be kind of where our predictions should be steered towards, like what is going to cause the unrest. I think one of Cooney's kids could be making a play. Maybe like both sides under both mothers could, be at conflict with each other. That'd be unfortunate, but it's possible. Maybe the gods that were against Cooney's rise try to lift someone else up. Maybe it's Jin Mazzotti. Yeah. We'll see.
A lot of angles.
Yeah. I think that there won't be as much like outright violence and it will be more political gaming. That's my or it's more people versus gods. Yes.
Is there a magic system in this series? Because I feel like I recall magic being brought up at some point.
I mean, there's the smokecraft kind of thing.
I did want to bring that up. I was like, is she a magician?
Yeah.
She's seeing into people's hearts. Yeah.
And then I think the gods, like, if you want to count them as magic.
So I have an answer for what I remember, not specifically, but if like you want to know, I don't know.
Sure.
Yes.
I don't think so. I don't think there's like magic systems in this world. I think, like you said, science and technology I think that's what he's more interested in. And whether, if you look at that stuff, is it feasible? He said everything he creates in this series, he did the math, is essentially what he's saying, which boggles my mind, but he's way smarter than I'll ever be. So I don't think there's like legit magic, but I could be off. And unless you count, like, there's gods. I mean, that is magic.
Something Arthur C. Clarke quote.
Yeah, because, I mean, he did coin it as silk punk. So it's not like traditional magic, and it's more akin to something like cyberpunk or steampunk. I should say steampunk.
I found it incredibly readable, like the stuff that comes up. I'm just like, this is nuts. So
I like the explanation of
yeah,
the inventions. And like one of the things I really it's like a small moment, but it's like Kogo is like triaging all these like inventors and like all these things, and then Luanzia comes back and he's like sees the potential in the like applications of these
yeah.
different things and actually like
He's
makes
like the
them
Simon
useful.
Cowell of
Oh
all these
no.
inventors coming up. He's like, yeah, we'll get back to you. And then this one, yes.
Or how he's sending him over to Monta, like, you'll
Yeah,
be useful
right.
over there.
Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Any last thoughts?
I think we nailed it.
All right. Well, with that, thank you for all for listening, and we're very excited for The Wall of Storms, which is the next book. I think we'll have to take a look to see how we'll cover that one. I think it is bigger, but also I think we do want to do it closer together, faster. So until next time, bye.
See ya.
All right.
See you later.
I have two statements that will probably upset two fandoms.
That's
Yes.
fine. Make him mad. That's how we get comments.
Okay, I've never read Game of Thrones, and honestly, don't intend to. I've seen the shows, well, even like the House of Dragons, I kind of dropped off, but I've seen the Game of Thrones show. And to me, this, at least this first book, was very much a Game of Thrones. Who's going to become in power, all this power struggles and the fighting, whose vision of the new world is going to win. And I I don't know. This was so much more compelling to me than what I have consumed of the Game of Thrones world. And the other statement is um I wish I had gotten this level of excitement, conciseness, and like fun, honestly, reading this from Malazan.
Ooh, I love it. Eat that, Ash. You're in.
Now, I will say though, the emotional tension and the emotional depth, there is a lot of it in this first book. So I'm very curious to see how much more he expands. And I know he's capable of it from his other works, but yeah, like how much more he will deepen that and make it more impactful in the later books of the series. But it's just nice to be able to read something that is not as okay, you know what? I'm gonna cut that part out because that
No,
probably will be too much.
no.
Which
They
part
need to
out?
hear it.
Both comparisons?
I mean, it's just this is much more readable. There's still a lot of characters, and there's still like quite a bit of like mystery and setup. It is more predictable, but for me, the things that I really like are the interactions between the characters. It is very character driven, right? And the plot does happen. It's like a good balance of character and plot, and it keeps moving. Like I'm like I can't stop now. Like I want to keep reading this as opposed to it feeling more like a chore.
So when you posed that question to us, ahead of the recording, I did say in my internal notes, I was like, it's more readable than both of those. So it's funny you brought that up because that is something I said, how it's more readable. But I think it's doing different things than A Song of Ice and Fire, and like the intentions behind both series are pretty different. To where a comparison is, I think the political stuff and everything surrounding like who's going to take the throne, all these political advisors, all these military leaders, that stuff is pretty similar. But so far in Dandelion, it's the people who trust in their friends and who have positive leadership aspects that are coming out on top. When in A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, it's like who plays the most dirty.
Sure.
It's way more of a grim
It's more
dark.
gritty. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I wouldn't expect a Cersei to be successful in Dandelion Dynasty. And as far as the Malazan comparison, I mean, you only mentioned it being more fun. I think it has potential to be more fun, but I would still cite like Malazan Marine stuff and like the comedy of like bug tail stuff as more fun than Dandelion. That's
Fair,
where
fair.
I land on those two things.
That's fair. I accept those.
Okay, cool.
I, for one, can firmly say that out of the 3 series mentioned, this one's my favorite to read.
Mm.
I haven't read A Song of Ice and Fire, and I haven't read Malazan, so that's kind of a...
Okay.
It's
Oh, wait a
already
second.
decided before the conversation even starts.
Easy victory.
Oh, spook.
And that's kind of what I wrote for the question. I haven't read the others. I will say I don't think I could determine my favorite series just from the first book. I
Yeah.
would need to read the rest of this to fully make that decision, or the second one at least, to see how it continues on.
Yeah.
So I'm interested when I start Malazan next year how I feel looking
Nice.
back comparing between the two.
I will say I did make the Malazan comparison and with a bit of a, tongue in cheek, but in terms of discussion, there's definitely way more meat for Malazan to discuss than it is here, I think. This is fairly straightforward. There are really interesting themes, really interesting characters, but in terms of like, I will say, if we did take a more historical view on this, there probably would be a lot more that we would discuss on, but I'm just not qualified to do that. So.
Same. But yeah, I could see that.
I think there are certain aspects of this book that we could do entire episodes discussing, like at least like the themes,
Yeah.
because there's a lot going on there, and how the book handles its themes and giving us so many different viewpoints. But also, you guys did 50 plus episodes of Malazan, so I don't think we could do that. But